The silverware and Terria Belladonna glasses clinked like delicate wind chimes as Eva Rico released her father's hand. She didn't bolt, just took 3 quick steps across the terracotta tiles, warmed by the kitchen's ovens, heading straight for the waitress with the kindest-looking eyes. She threw her arms around the woman's legs, pressing her cheek against the black apron fabric that carried a subtle fragrance of flowers and a hint of orange zest. "I want her to be my new mommy," Eva declared. The sound seemed to drain from the room. The Friday night rush hour concertinaed inward. Forks hung suspended in the air. Waiters stood frozen. The violin music coming from the speakers faded to almost nothing. Near the entrance, 2 men in dark gray suits instinctively adjusted their jacket hems, ready to reveal their weapons if their boss made any wrong moves. Matteo Rico, wearing an open-collared black suit and a somber dark tie, remained perfectly still. He tilted his head slightly, as if he'd heard a voice from the ceiling. This city, which always bent to his will, the docks, the clubs, the cutthroat warehouses, had never given him something like this. His daughter's voice, so clear and small, carried a wish he had no idea how to fulfill. The waitress didn't jump or flinch. She simply bent down easily, meeting the little girl at eye level. Her name tag read Liz in bold, capital letters. It was a neat, confident, unfussy script. Up close, she possessed a beauty that didn't shout for attention. Her light brown hair was pulled back into a practical knot. She had green eyes that seemed to soak up every detail with kindness, and a mouth that chose gentle words, even when silence might have been the safer option. "And what's your name, sweetheart?" she asked softly, like sharing a secret. Eva's fingers tightened their grip. "Ava," she whispered. Then, enunciating each syllable with care, "Per favor, gelato." A million different things could have gone wrong. The wrong kind of smile, the wrong kind of pity, the wrong kind of fear when the room realized just whose daughter was now claiming a complete stranger. Instead, Liz replied in warm, clear Italian, the kind that conjured up the aromas of basil and summer afternoons, and a home you missed the moment you left it. "Gelato is for brave girls after dinner. Are you brave?" Eva nodded, solemn as if taking an oath. Something inside Matteo's chest seemed to give way. He felt it like a seam ripped from 2 pieces of tightly woven fabric. Air rushed in where it had never been allowed to go before. A nervous maitre d', his hands trembling, gestured them toward a corner banquette. It offered good sight lines, twin exits, and nothing behind it but a solid brick wall. The Rico bodyguards, their faces like granite, recalculated the room, the angles, the laughter that had suddenly become a threat because it had come from a child who rarely laughed. When Matteo finally spoke, his voice was like velvet over coal. "We'll stay." Liz picked up 2 menus, then hesitated. Her eyes flicked to the bodyguards, then to Matteo's cuff, hand-stitched, obviously expensive, the kind of detail a man wore when he felt no need to apologize for being the one in charge. The tension in the room pulsed like a second heartbeat. Still, she smiled as if the only thing that truly mattered was whether this little girl felt safe tonight. "Welcome," she said, placing glasses of water on the table with deliberate care. "We have a special on orecchiette with sausage and broccoli rabe, and a chef-made fresh orange ricotta cake. But I can also make a very serious bowl of plain spaghetti for very serious princesses." "Serious," Eva said, mimicking the cadence. Her mouth almost remembered how to smile. Almost. Matteo ordered the ossobuco without even glancing at the menu. When his gaze returned to Liz, it carried a history that no menu could ever convey. And for her, bring what you would feed a daughter. Their eyes held each other a beat too long. She didn't flinch. She didn't look away to see who else was watching. "Right away," Liz said. He told himself he was watching her because it was his nature. The boss always watched. He learned the rhythm of rooms. He gauged loyalty by the way a man set down his glass and by the way a woman lied about not being afraid. But it was more than that. Not only that. Liz moved like an apology to a hard world. When a couple started arguing too loudly near the bar, she refilled their water glasses and placed a dish of olives between them like a peace offering. When a busboy's tray wobbled, She steadied it with her left hand and caught a sliding fork with her right, laughing softly, as if preventing small things from falling apart was a good kind of magic anyone could learn. Eva followed Liz with her eyes the way children follow a kite, certain it will disappear from the sky if they blink. Every time Liz drifted nearby, Eva's shoulders rose slightly, then relaxed. By the time the spaghetti arrived, the steam rising from the simple, honest sauce, Eva had inched forward to the very edge of her seat. "Do you know any Italian words?" Liz asked her conspiratorially. "Stella," Eva said, "like the song." Liz's heart showed itself then, an open, vulnerable thing that didn't panic at the sound of tender words. "Then you must be a star," she whispered. "And when you make a wish, the sky listens." Mateo's fork paused halfway to his mouth. It was ridiculous how easily that line slid beneath his armor. Wishes were for men who could afford to lose. He couldn't. Yet his fingers unconsciously shifted closer to the edge of the table, closer to Eva's small hand. He hadn't wanted dessert in years. Now the entire night tasted like sugar he'd sworn off. Across the street, a shutter clicked, a camera quick and practiced. Dario, the younger of his shadows, caught the flash in the window's reflection and touched his earpiece. Mateo didn't look. He chewed the ossobuco like a man who could devote his full attention to the lamb marrow while simultaneously memorizing the gait of a man in a gray hoodie who had just turned onto Mulberry Street without any particular hurry. "Do you sing the Star Song?" Liz asked. Eva glanced at her father. "Go on," Mateo said, his voice softer than he realized. Liz hummed the first few notes, quietly, inviting rather than performing. Ava's lips tentatively formed the melody, hesitant at first, then gaining courage. Her voice was thin, but true, weaving through the restaurant's general hum like a silver thread. A table of older men near the kitchen fell silent in the middle of a card game. Someone in the back made the sign of the cross without even thinking about it. When the last note faded into silence, Eva looked up, almost shy. "Gelato now?" Liz bowed slightly. As promised, she brought a small bowl of gelato with a single candle stuck in it for bravery. She said, "You may make a wish if your father agrees." Mateo's throat had tightened into a knot he wouldn't explain to any man. "Make it," he said. Eva closed her eyes. Her eyelashes, dark and fragile, brushed her cheeks. Mateo used to watch his late wife blow out birthday candles with that same half-smile. He looked at the candle as if it had the audacity to stand there in his restaurant and remind him of what his own hands hadn't been able to protect. Eva blew, and the smoke curled upward like the city exhaling. "What did you wish for?" Liz asked, breaking the tension the way good people do, with gentle hands and a door propped open to let in fresh air. Eva leaned in close until her hair brushed the table. "For angels to find us," she confided, then louder like a declaration. "And for you to come again." Liz's laugh was small and almost stunned. She folded her order pad into her apron pocket, buying herself a second to feel the moment without losing her composure. "I work most nights," she said carefully, "but I don't." Mateo finished her sentence. "She means, will you visit?" Liz looked directly at him. It took courage to do that in his city, in his corner, under the watchful gaze of men who carried violence as naturally as they carried their wallets. "I don't do visits," she said. "I don't blur the lines with customers, especially not at night." He almost respected that more than the gelato, the song, and the candle. "Daytime," he said. "My aunt will be there. The child has lost enough." Liz's eyes softened, then sharpened. "I'm here for her," she said, and he heard the boundary click back into place. "If I come, it's for her." "Of course," Mateo said, and he meant it. The lie was that he didn't also want something for himself. Not a body. He could buy those. But the calm he saw in Liz's shoulders, the way rooms seemed to breathe easier when she set down a plate like a promise. The check arrived. He placed cash on the table. Too much on purpose to see what she would do. She counted it, plucked out 2 bills, and tucked them under the leather folder, leaving the rest. "You overpaid," she said. His mouth tilted slightly. "Consider it hazard pay." For what hazard? She asked, genuinely curious. For making my daughter laugh, he said. Because the truth felt like blasphemy said aloud. Her smile didn't grow wider with the money. It warmed at the honesty. Then let me owe you the change, she said. Next time, I'll bring her a book. He rose. Ava's tiny hand found his without asking. He felt the delicate bones of her palm, the life in it. How had he lived with both fists clenched for so long? As they crossed the threshold, the bell above the door chimed. Outside, a motorcycle idled for too long. The cameraman across the street fidgeted with his lens. Somewhere in the city, a siren wailed, a ribbon of blue and urgency. Mateo didn't look back. Liz did. She watched father and daughter disappear into a night that regarded them with both a promise and a threat. She pressed a hand to her apron pocket, where an old subway card lived next to a folded page from a child psychology textbook about selective mutism. A girl who hadn't spoken much had sung tonight. In the window's reflection, a shape moved. A gray hoodie. A hand lifted a phone. A snap. Liz's skin prickled. Everything okay? The chef called from the pass. Fine, Liz lied. Because good women sometimes do. She cleared the banquette slowly, found a paper napkin crumpled into a star shape, placed there by small hands. She smoothed it out as if smoothing a child's hair. Then she glanced once more at the glass, at the street, at the space where a man like a storm had stood still so his child could catch her breath. Who was watching whom tonight? She would tell herself it didn't matter. She would tell herself that boundaries were fences that kept gardens safe. But gardens, she knew, needed rain, and rain didn't ask the fence for permission. The first raindrops began to fall just as Liz Thompson pulled the alley door shut behind her. The garbage bins clattered softly, the air thick with garlic and engine oil. And somewhere above, the neon sign for Terria Belladonna pulsed pink against the wet brick. She told herself she wasn't looking over her shoulder. But she was. That faint sound again. Rubber scraping against pavement. Footsteps. Light but deliberate. Her pulse quickened. The shadow she'd seen in the window's reflection earlier hadn't been a trick of the light. Mateo Rico, she whispered under her breath. Testing the name that the staff whispered about when the kitchen was closed. They called him the Quiet King. Some said he owned half the city. Others said he owned the silence people feared most. And tonight his daughter had chosen her. Mateo didn't sleep. His penthouse windows overlooked a city that never did either. Lights blinked like pulse monitors across Manhattan's glass arteries. He poured himself a finger of whiskey, but it did nothing for the ache behind his ribs. Down the hall, Eva slept, clutching the paper napkin star Liz had folded for her. The girl hadn't let go of it all night. He told himself that was good progress. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw the camera flash reflected in the restaurant window. Someone had been watching him with his guard down, with her near him. Weakness looked like warmth to men like Rafe Calder, and warmth got you killed. The next morning, Liz arrived at the restaurant early, hoping that a little light and noise would burn away whatever weird energy had followed her home. But the city felt slower today, gray, expectant. Someone called for you, said Marco, the restaurant's manager, handing her a folded note. Guy didn't give a name. Said you made a good impression last night. Liz frowned. The handwriting was too neat to be random. Asterisk, this is Mateo Rico. Asterisk, asterisk, my daughter hasn't stopped talking about you. Asterisk, asterisk, come for dinner at our apartment tomorrow, 2 p.m. My aunt will be there. It's for the child's sake. Asterisk, Miss Rico. Her heart skipped a beat. She should throw it away. She should call the cops or maybe the restaurant owner. But something inside her whispered differently. She remembered the little girl's small voice saying, "The angel sent you." Liz folded the note and tucked it into her pocket. At 2 p.m. The next day, she stood in front of a black steel gate that looked like it could stop a tank. A guard scanned her ID, then buzzed her through. The Rico penthouse sat high above the East River, sunlight bending through glass walls that made her feel like she was stepping inside a painting. Mateo was waiting at the top of the stairs. He was wearing a black shirt, sleeves rolled to the forearm. the ink on his wrist visible, a lion surrounded by Latin script, power in human form. But his eyes softened the moment he saw Eva peeking out from behind his leg. "Liz," he said, his voice low and resonant. "Thank you for coming." "I'm here for her," Liz said quickly. "Not for whatever this is." His mouth curved into a small, knowing smile. "Good. She needs someone who isn't afraid to talk back." Eva tugged on Liz's hand, leading her into the living room. There were toys scattered around, half-tidied, half-forgotten signs of a life trying to be normal. The little girl chattered in a mix of English and Italian now, showing her drawings of angels and butterflies. "She's talking more," Liz said softly. Matteo nodded. "Since that night, you woke something in her." "I didn't do anything special," Liz replied. "You listened," he said. "That's rarer than you think." She glanced at him. "Do you always study people like you're about to make a deal?" He didn't blink. "Everything in my world is a deal, Señorina. Some written, some not." "And this?" she asked. "Which one am I?" He stepped closer, his voice quieter now. "A deal of the heart, but not on paper." Liz's pulse quickened. His nearness was a current, controlled, dangerous, magnetic. She stepped back just enough to breathe. Eva's laugh broke the tension. "Mia, Liz, cookies?" Liz knelt down, grateful for the distraction. "Only if your daddy helps." "Daddy doesn't bake," Matteo said dryly. "He does today," Liz teased. Zianina Rico arrived soon after, a small, sharp-eyed woman wrapped in a silk scarf. She watched Liz like she was reading a confession written in invisible ink. "You have gentle hands," Zianina said finally. "That's good. My brother had a wife with gentle hands, too. Kept Matteo human." Liz smiled, unsure if that was a blessing or a warning. By late afternoon, the kitchen smelled like sugar and forgiveness. Matteo leaned against the counter, his sleeves dusted with flour, pretending he wasn't enjoying himself. Liz caught him watching her once, twice, too many times. When Eva insisted on singing while they baked, Liz hesitated for only a moment, then started humming Stella. "Stellina." Matteo froze mid-motion, the wooden spoon halfway to the bowl. "That song again, Isabella's lullaby." Liz saw the pain flicker across his face and stopped. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Don't be," he said, his voice rough. "Keep going." And she did. When Eva's voice joined hers, soft and pure, Matteo turned away and wiped his hands on a towel that didn't need wiping. His chest hurt in a way no bullet had ever managed. That evening, when Liz was leaving, Matteo walked her to the elevator. "You handled Zianina," he said. "That's a miracle. She's protective." Liz smiled. "Like you." His gaze lingered. "You shouldn't come here again." Liz blinked. "Excuse me?" "You live in a clean world," he said. "I live in one that stains everything it touches. People who stand too close to me get hurt." She studied him for a long moment. "You're afraid." His jaw tightened. "I'm cautious. There's a difference." The elevator doors opened. She stepped inside but turned before they closed. "You can't protect her from every shadow, Matteo. Some healing happens in the light." And then she was gone. That night, Matteo's phone buzzed. It was Rafe calling, a name that made the air heavier. "Rico," Rafe said with mock cheer. "Saw the photos. Sweet kid, cute waitress." Matteo's blood went cold. "What photos?" "You should check tomorrow's New York Chronicle. They're calling it The Widowmaker's Soft Side. Touching piece. Maybe you're going public. Or maybe someone wants to remind you what happens when the king gets sentimental." Matteo's glass shattered in his hand. The headline the next morning made him see red. "Mafia boss's little princess finds hope in diner waitress." A grainy photo showed Liz kneeling by Eva, the girl smiling, the gelato candle between them. A second photo showed Matteo watching from the shadows, his expression unreadable. He dialed Dario. "Find the photographer, then find out who paid him." "Already on it, boss," Dario said. "We traced it back to Calder's men." "Handle it quietly," Matteo ordered. But even as he said it, he knew quietly wasn't how this would end. Liz arrived at the restaurant to find 2 black cars idling across the street. She didn't notice the man in the gray hoodie watching from a diner booth nearby, snapping another photo. When she stepped inside, Marco handed her the newspaper. "You're famous." Her stomach dropped. "Oh my God." She read the caption aloud under her breath. Asterisk single waitress brings warmth to mobster's family. Matteo Rico, Mafia boss. Father, widower, monster. Asterisk her hands trembled. That night her phone rang. A deep voice, calm and unmistakable. "Liz, don't panic. You're safe. But from now on, you don't walk home alone. I'm sending a car. You're under my protection." "Protection?" she repeated, incredulous. "From who?" "From me," he said quietly. "From what being near me will cost you." The line went dead. She didn't see him again for 3 days. Not until a black SUV pulled up outside the restaurant just after closing. "Get in," Matteo said through the open window. Liz crossed her arms. "You can't keep appearing like this. People will talk." "They already are," he replied. "And I don't care. My enemies do." "Then let me go," she said. He leaned out, his eyes dark with something between fury and fear. "You think I could, after my daughter asked for you in her sleep?" Her heart faltered. "What?" "She said your name last night," Matteo murmured. First time she's spoken in her dreams since her mother died. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The city pulsed around them, loud and alive. Finally, Liz opened the door and slid in. "Just to make sure she's okay," she said softly. Matteo nodded, but his expression told a different story. When they reached the penthouse, Eva ran straight into Liz's arms, sleepy and smiling. Matteo stood in the doorway watching, silent. After Eva was tucked in, Liz turned to leave. But Matteo caught her wrist. Not rough, not gentle, just real. "You changed everything," he said. "Maybe that's not a bad thing. It is when change gets people killed." "Then teach me your world," she challenged. "So I know what I'm risking." He stepped closer, his breath warm against her ear. "You don't belong in it, Liz." "Then maybe your world should change," she whispered. For the first time in years, Matteo Rico laughed, a quiet, disbelieving sound. It wasn't amusement. It was the sound of a man realizing he'd already lost the battle he hadn't meant to start. Outside, unseen, the gray-hooded man sent another photo to his employer. Asterisk subject confirmed. Waitress seen entering Rico residence again. Asterisk seconds later, a reply pinged back. Asterisk good. Tell Rafe she's his leverage now. Asterisk New York looked peaceful from above, but Matteo Rico knew better. Peace was just camouflage for the next storm. 3 days had passed since the attack in Liz's apartment. Since then, she and Eva had lived inside Matteo's penthouse, a glass fortress with hidden cameras and guards that changed shifts like clockwork. It was supposed to be protection, but sometimes safety felt more like a cage. Every morning, Matteo would sit across from Liz at the long marble table while Eva colored between them. He'd pretend to read the newspaper, but his eyes kept finding her. The way she tied her hair, the way she laughed softly at Eva's questions, the way her presence seemed to shrink the ghosts in the room. Liz noticed. "You stare like you're searching for something that isn't there," she said once. He didn't deny it. "Maybe I am." She smiled faintly. "Or maybe you're afraid it's already here." Matteo didn't answer. The truth was worse than either, because what he was afraid of wasn't the danger outside, but how alive he felt when she was near. Zianina arrived that afternoon, carrying both biscotti and opinions. "You're rebuilding the house," she told Matteo. "You just don't realize it yet." Then she turned to Liz. "You have the hands of someone who heals people without medicine. Keep using them." Liz blushed. "I just talked to her. That's all." "Talking is medicine," Zianina said simply. Eva ran in holding a drawing 3 figures under a big yellow sun. "That's Mommy in heaven," she explained, pointing to the angel. "That's Daddy and that's Liz." Liz froze. Matteo's throat tightened. He couldn't remember the last time Eva had drawn him smiling. Later that night, Detective Mara Cole arrived unannounced. Trench coat, tired eyes, and a tone that didn't bother with small talk. "We intercepted chatter," she said, dropping a file on Mateo's desk. "Rafe Calder is losing patience. The photos worked. He thinks you're soft now. He's planning something big." "What kind of something?" Mateo asked. "Leverage," Mara said. "And he knows where to find it." Her gaze flicked toward Liz. "You need to get her and the kid out of the city." Liz crossed her arms. "I'm standing right here." Mara looked impressed. "So, you've got a backbone. Good. You'll need it." She handed Liz a small black device. "One press. I'll be here in 5 minutes. Use it if you smell trouble." Mateo frowned. "She won't need it." "She will," Mara replied. "You just don't know when." Then she was gone, leaving a silence that tasted like gunpowder. That night, Eva begged Liz for a bedtime story. Mateo listened from the doorway as Liz improvised one about a lonely lion who found a girl brave enough to look him in the eye. When Eva finally fell asleep, Mateo said quietly, "You shouldn't tell her stories about lions." Liz smiled. "Then maybe lions should stop pretending they're monsters." He looked away. "Monsters don't get to choose who they hurt, and fathers don't get to stop loving," she whispered back. Something in his chest cracked open at that. A small, dangerous fracture. The next morning, Liz found a folded note on the kitchen counter. Asterisk, "Don't go anywhere today. Someone's watching the building." Asterisk, she didn't need to ask who it came from. The handwriting was Mateo's, sharp, exact, the handwriting of a man used to giving orders, not reasons. She tried to act normal, helping Eva with her breakfast, but her hands shook when she poured the milk. "Daddy says you're nervous," Eva said matter-of-factly. Liz smiled weakly. "Daddy sees too much. Only when it's about people he cares about," Eva replied, and Liz froze at how simply the child spoke the truth. By afternoon, the tension in the penthouse had thickened like fog. Mateo's men came and went in silence, their eyes scanning windows and shadows. He tried to conceal his worry, but Liz could feel it nonetheless. The way he unconsciously touched the gun on the table, the way he lingered just a little too long by the balcony door. "Talk to me," she finally said. "You're waiting for something." "I'm waiting for nothing," he lied. "And that's what scares me." Liz hesitated for a moment, then stepped closer to him. "You can't control everything, Mateo." He met her gaze directly. "In my world, control is the only thing that keeps people alive. Then maybe you need a new world." He almost smiled, a ghost of amusement flickering across his lips. "You're infuriating." "Still here though," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper. "Unfortunately," he murmured, but the way he looked at her conveyed a completely different sentiment. That evening, a powerful thunderstorm rolled over Manhattan, transforming the cityscape into a breathtaking spectacle of silver and life. Ava danced barefoot on the cool marble floors, while Liz playfully taught her to catch raindrops through the open balcony door. Mateo watched them from a distance, his hands buried deep in his pockets, his heart locked away in a place he couldn't quite access. "Come join us," Liz called out, beckoning him with a warm smile. He shook his head, a hint of melancholy in his eyes. "Someone has to guard the kingdom. Even kings need rest," she countered gently. "Only when the war is over. Then you should know," she whispered, stepping close enough for him to smell the fresh rain in her hair. "The war's not just out there anymore." He didn't ask her to elaborate on what she meant. He didn't need to. That night, the luxurious penthouse fell silent. Ava slept soundly between two of her favorite stuffed animals. Zianina murmured her evening prayers in the adjacent room. Liz walked out onto the balcony with a soft blanket and found Mateo already there, silently gazing out at the illuminated skyline. "Do you ever wish you could disappear?" she asked, her voice soft against the night air. He didn't turn to look at her. "Every day. But the world won't let men like me vanish. We make too much noise when we try." Liz studied him, carefully observing the shadowed lines etched into his face, the profound exhaustion hidden just beneath the surface of his powerful exterior. "You don't scare me, Mateo. I should, he said, his voice a low rumble. I've built my life on fear. Then maybe it's time you build it on something else. Her words lingered in the air between them like smoke, soft, dangerous, and undeniably true. Mateo slowly turned to face her, his eyes searching hers. And what would that be? Love? She said simply, meeting his intense gaze. He stepped closer until the space between them completely dissolved. His hand gently brushed her hair back, his fingers trembling ever so slightly. You think love can protect you from what I am? I think love is the only thing that still can. The words hung suspended between them, fragile yet undeniably electric. For one impossible second, he almost kissed her. Then the world went black. The lights died instantly. Not a flicker, but a complete and total blackout. The familiar hum of the city outside vanished, replaced by the low, ominous growl of thunder and the distant, haunting echo of sirens. Mateo froze, his senses on high alert. Backup's out. He immediately reached for his gun. Stay with Na. Get Ava. Liz didn't argue. She ran swiftly down the hall, her heart pounding in her chest, and scooped Ava up into her arms. Shoo! Baby, it's okay, she whispered reassuringly. Back in the living room, Mateo moved with silent precision, his silhouette cutting through the darkness like a sharp blade. The city lights outside glowed a faint, ominous red through the storm, and then softly came a sound. Tap once, twice, 3 times on the glass. Liz clutched Ava tighter, her knuckles white. Mateo. He turned his head slightly, listening intently. I hear it. Another tap. Slower this time. Deliberate. Someone was out there on the balcony. Mateo raised his gun, his voice low and calm but laced with steel. Stay back. A flash of lightning illuminated the shape of a man outside, partially concealed behind the glass. Then came a whispered message through the storm. Tell the king his crown is slipping. The window cracked, a spiderweb of impact blooming across the glass, and the sound was instantly swallowed by the raging storm. Mateo stepped forward, his finger resting lightly on the trigger. Behind him, Liz held Ava close, whispering prayers she didn't even remember learning. The city had gone completely dark. The war had come home, and in that eerie silence, the ruthless Mafia boss who had sworn never to feel again finally understood the devastating cost of loving someone he couldn't afford to lose. Thunder rolled violently over Manhattan, shaking the glass walls of the Rico penthouse. The city below flickered in and out of light, resembling a heartbeat slowly fading away. Mateo Rico moved through the oppressive darkness with the ingrained precision of a man who had lived his entire life on the knife's edge of an ambush. The gun held firmly in his hand was steady, but his pulse was anything but. Stay in Ava's room, he ordered, his voice low and controlled, the kind of voice that compelled people to obey without questioning. But Liz Thompson didn't move an inch. If someone's out there, you can't face them alone. I faced worse. Not when someone else's life depends on it, she said resolutely, clutching Eva tightly against her chest. Mateo's jaw tightened with suppressed emotion. There it was again. That very thing that simultaneously terrified and thrilled him to his core. She didn't cower in fear. She stood up to him, and for a man accustomed to unwavering obedience, that particular brand of courage felt almost overwhelmingly intimate. He looked at her intently for a long, drawn-out second before whispering, "Lock the door. That's an order." Then he was gone, melting back into the darkness. The wind screamed relentlessly against the windows as he stepped cautiously onto the balcony. A flash of lightning illuminated a shadowy figure crouched near the far railing. The man lifted something, not a gun, but a small metallic device with a blinking red light. Bomb! Mateo hissed, instinctively diving forward. He ripped the detonator from the intruder's hand just as the man lunged at him. They crashed violently against the railing, the metal groaning under the combined weight. The intruder was skilled, quick, silent, and clearly well-trained. But Mateo was faster, fueled by adrenaline and a fierce protective instinct. He twisted the man's wrist until the bone audibly cracked, disarmed him with ruthless efficiency, and slammed him hard against the cold concrete. "Who sent you?" Mateo growled, his voice a menacing snarl. The man spat a mouthful of blood, grinning through his broken teeth. "Rafe sends his regards." Before Mateo could strike again, the intruder's earpiece crackled to life. "Plan B now." Then the man smiled, a chillingly serene expression, and casually rolled backward off the balcony. Mateo rushed to the edge, peering down into the darkness below, but it was too late. The man had vanished into the raging storm. He turned back inside, his pulse still pounding in his ears. The device in his hand wasn't actually a bomb. It was a tracker, which meant the real attack wasn't happening here. It was happening somewhere else entirely. And then he heard it, the faint creak of a door opening. Eva's door. "Liz," he called out, sprinting frantically down the hall. The room was empty. The window had been shattered inward, and the curtains were flapping wildly in the wind. Shards of glass glittered menacingly across the floor like spilled diamonds. Mateo's stomach dropped like a stone. No. He ran back to the balcony, his eyes desperately scanning the rooftops below. And there, just half a block away, a black van sped off into the night, its tires slicing through the rain-slicked puddles. "Dario," he barked into his comm, his voice dangerously calm. "They've got them. Move now." Sirens immediately erupted across the city as the vast Rico network mobilized, cars screeching through red lights, radios crackling with urgent orders. But Mateo didn't wait for backup to arrive. He jumped into his own car and slammed his foot on the gas. Inside the speeding van, Liz fought back with every ounce of strength she possessed. Her wrists were tightly bound, her cheek was already bruised, but her eyes burned with unwavering fury. "Let her go," she screamed, twisting violently against the seat belt as Eva sobbed uncontrollably beside her. The man in the front seat laughed cruelly. "Orders were clear. The kid's the bonus. You're the message." Liz lunged forward with animalistic ferocity, teeth bared, kicking the man in the ribs hard enough to make him curse in pain. "Tell your boss he should have picked an easier target. Lady, you don't even know who you're dealing with." "I do now," she said coldly, her voice laced with deadly intent. "And he's about to regret it." The driver snorted derisively, just moments before a black Maserati slammed violently into the van's side at full speed. The impact was deafening. Metal shrieked and twisted. The van spun wildly, tires screeching across the wet asphalt, before crashing with a bone-jarring thud into a sturdy lamppost. Smoke billowed ominously from the crumpled hood. Before Liz could even fully process what had happened, the driver's side door was ripped open with brutal force. Mateo appeared through the swirling haze like a vengeful nightmare forged of thunder and pure, unadulterated rage. He hauled the first man out by his collar and threw him roughly onto the rain-soaked street. The second man tried desperately to raise a weapon, but Mateo's bullet shattered the window before he could even blink. "Don't look," Mateo said as he wrenched open the van door, his voice rough and shaking with barely suppressed emotion. "I've got you." Liz's hands trembled uncontrollably as he swiftly cut through the zip ties binding her wrists. "You came for us. Always," he thought. He lifted Ava out first, tucking the child protectively against his chest. "It's over," he whispered reassuringly, though his own eyes betrayed the fact that it was far from truly over. He turned his attention to Liz, gently brushing shards of glass from her hair. "You okay?" "I will be," she said, her voice slightly shaky. "But you don't worry about me." "Too late," she murmured softly. By the time Dario's team finally arrived, the streets were total chaos. Sirens wailed, flashing lights strobed, and reporters were already circling like vultures, eager for a story. Mateo handed Ava over to Na's waiting arms and turned to Liz, his shirt soaked with a mixture of rain and blood. "You shouldn't have been there," he said quietly, his gaze intense. "You mean in your life?" "In my world," he corrected her, his voice barely above a whisper. She met his gaze directly, without a hint of fear. "You can build all the walls you want, Mateo, but they won't stop me from standing beside you." He stared at her for a long moment, completely captivated by this extraordinary woman who had turned his carefully structured universe into something raw, unpredictable, and undeniably real. Then, he said the one thing he hadn't allowed himself to say in years. "I was afraid. Of losing control?" "No," he said softly, his voice filled with a vulnerability he rarely displayed. "Of losing you." Liz's eyes glistened with unshed tears. She stepped closer, close enough to feel his warm breath on her skin. "Then stop pushing me away." Mateo's hands hovered near her face, hesitant, trembling slightly. "If I touch you, there's no going back." "Good," she whispered, her voice filled with unwavering conviction. "Because I don't want to." His carefully constructed control finally snapped. He kissed her, deeply, desperately, the taste of rain mingling with the salt of her tears. For that one precious moment, the rest of the world simply disappeared. No mafia, no danger, just two broken souls desperately trying to remember what love felt like when it wasn't forbidden. When he finally pulled back, his forehead rested gently against hers. "You have no idea what you've started. Then you'd better be ready to finish it," she said, her voice barely a whisper but filled with unwavering resolve. That night, back in the relative safety of the penthouse, the emotional aftermath settled heavily like lingering smoke. Ava slept soundly under Na's watchful care. Mateo and Liz sat in comfortable silence by the crackling fire, the relentless rain still whispering against the glass. "You should go," he said at last, his voice low and filled with a hint of resignation. "Before this gets worse." Liz turned toward him, her eyes searching his. "It already did, and I'm still here." He offered a small, pained smile. "You don't understand. If they couldn't break me by killing my wife, they'll try again with you." "Then we fight," she said simply, her voice filled with unwavering determination. "Together." Mateo exhaled slowly, his eyes tracing the delicate lines of her face as if he were trying to memorize every detail, in case the world decided to cruelly take her away from him. "You don't even flinch when I say things like that." "Why?" "Because I stopped being afraid the night you saved us," she said softly, her voice filled with genuine emotion. "And because I finally understand why Eva smiles again. You make her feel safe. And for some insane reason, you make me feel the same." He reached out and gently took her hand in his. "You make me believe in things I buried with Isabella." They sat there together, their fingers entwined, allowing the comfortable silence to speak volumes. But outside in the eerie afterglow of the storm, a dark shadow moved stealthily across the building opposite, the lens of a camera glinting momentarily before disappearing back into the darkness. The next morning, the incriminating photo would appear on Rafe Calder's desk, and he'd smile, a cold, calculating expression on his face. "If he loves her that much," Rafe said, as he casually lit a thick cigar, "then I finally know how to destroy him." The next morning, New York City looked deceptively calm and peaceful. Sunlight streamed through the massive glass walls of Mateo Rico's luxurious penthouse, chasing away the darkness and the relentless rain, but not the lingering tension. Downstairs, the news was running the very same sensationalized headline on every single screen. Mafia boss's waitress savior, kidnap, rescue, and forbidden romance. Mateo quickly muted the television before Ava could see the inflammatory report. He stood silently near the window, his sleeves casually rolled up, a cup of coffee forgotten on the nearby table. His world, the meticulously controlled world he had spent decades building, was now spiraling into complete chaos, and the reason for it all sat calmly at the kitchen counter, quietly braiding Eva's long hair. Liz Thompson, calm, strong, and stubbornly independent. "She shouldn't be on the news," she said softly, her voice laced with concern. Mateo's jaw flexed involuntarily. "You shouldn't be anywhere near me." "Too late," she replied simply, meeting his intense gaze without flinching. "We're past that point." He turned to face her, his eyes shadowed with a complex mixture of emotions. "You don't understand what happens next." "Yes, I do," she said, her voice filled with conviction. "You think love makes you weak, but maybe it's the only thing that's actually keeping you human. He didn't respond verbally, but when she reached out and gently took his hand, he didn't pull away. That afternoon, Rafe Calder sat comfortably in a plush leather chair across town, watching the very same broadcast with a look of barely concealed amusement. Public sympathy? He muttered disdainfully. He's turning into a hero. Can't have that. Orders, boss? His ever-present lieutenant asked. Rafe blew a plume of thick smoke towards the window, his eyes narrowed. No more violence for now. We'll use words instead. Fear spreads much faster when it's cleverly disguised as truth. He held up his phone, displaying the screen. On the screen was a candid photo of Liz laughing happily beside Ava. Let's ruin her completely before we kill her, he said, his voice laced with venom. Make the world believe that she wanted all of this. Back at the penthouse, Mateo's loyal men intercepted the first wave of the impending attack, not with guns and brute force, but with carefully crafted headlines designed to counteract the false narrative. Within hours, a series of fake stories began appearing online, spreading like wildfire. Waitress exposed as undercover informant. One blared. Rico boss falls for FBI mole, another claimed. Liz's phone buzzed incessantly. Threats, lies, and pure venom flooded her inbox. Mateo slammed his fist against the nearby wall hard enough to leave a visible crack in the plaster. He's not after me anymore, he said, his voice filled with barely suppressed rage. He's after your name. Liz's voice shook slightly, but her resolve remained unbroken. Then use it. Prove him wrong. Mateo looked at her, visibly torn between fury and profound admiration. You're asking me to go public. You already are, she said simply. The only question is, will you let him write the ending to the story, or will you? Her words hit him with more force than any bullet ever could. That night, Mateo gathered his most trusted men. Dario, ever stoic and loyal, spoke first. Boss, Rafe's bleeding resources. His docks are compromised. He's desperate. Desperate men are always dangerous, Mateo replied, his voice low and thoughtful. Then hit him first, Dario urged. End this once and for all. Mateo shook his head slowly. We end this clean. I won't build peace on top of more graves. Zianina, who had remained silent until that moment, crossed herself reverently. Your father would have been proud, she said quietly. Mateo almost smiled, a fleeting hint of amusement crossing his lips. He would have called me a fool. When night finally fell, Liz found Mateo standing alone on the balcony, silently staring out at the glittering city skyline. The air was thick with the lingering scent of rain and gunpowder. You're planning something, she said, stating it as a simple fact rather than a question. He didn't deny it. Tomorrow I meet with Rafe. Liz's breath caught sharply in her throat. You can't negotiate with a man who willingly tried to kidnap a child. I'm not negotiating, he said, his voice cold and resolute. I'm ending it. She stepped closer to him, her hand reaching out to touch his arm. Then take me with you. Mateo turned sharply, his eyes filled with a fierce protectiveness. No, you said you'd end it clean. I'm part of this now, Mateo, whether you like it or not. His voice dropped to a low, menacing growl. You think this is bravery, but it's suicide. Maybe, she conceded, her voice barely a whisper. But if my being there keeps you from pulling the trigger, then it's worth it. He looked at her intently for a long, drawn-out moment, his eyes searching hers for any sign of fear or hesitation. Then he whispered, You don't know what you're asking. I do, she said softly, her voice filled with unwavering conviction. I'm asking you not to die. The next morning, the world seemed to move in slow motion, as if time itself was holding its breath. Mateo wore black, a color that had become synonymous with his power and his dangerous life. His loyal men followed in 2 cars a discreet distance behind. Liz sat beside him, silent but steady, her hand resting lightly over his, not holding tightly, just there. Where are we going? She asked, her voice barely audible above the low hum of the engine. Neutral ground, he said, his gaze fixed on the road ahead. The old pier by the East River. Sounds romantic, she muttered, a hint of dark humor in her voice. He almost smiled, the corner of his mouth twitching slightly. Depends entirely on how the night ends. When they arrived at their destination, the pier was deserted, thick fog swirling over the dark water like tendrils of smoke. Rafe was already there, casually leaning against a sleek black car, smiling with the confident arrogance of a man who thought he'd already won the game. "Well, well," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "The king brings his new queen. Brave or stupid? Hard to tell these days." Mateo didn't flinch, his expression remaining impassive. "You wanted a conversation. You've got one." Rafe gestured expansively around the desolate pier. "You could have brought an army. I wouldn't have blamed you." "I did," Mateo said, his voice cold and devoid of emotion. "You just can't see it." They spoke for less than 5 minutes. It wasn't a true negotiation. It was merely a thinly veiled display of strategy disguised as polite civility. Rafe wanted the docks, and Mateo remained steadfast in his refusal. Rafe laughed, a harsh, unpleasant sound that echoed across the empty pier. "You've changed, Rico. You used to understand that fear is always worth more than love." Mateo's gaze didn't waver, his eyes locked on Rafe's. "Maybe I finally learned the true price of both." Rafe stepped closer, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "You really think she's not going to get you killed? Men like us don't get happy endings, Mateo. We get headlines, tragedies, graves." Mateo's hand twitched almost imperceptibly toward his holstered gun. But Liz spoke first, her voice clear and unwavering. "Maybe you just never met someone worth changing for." Rafe looked at her with feigned amusement. "Ah, the waitress speaks. How charming. Careful, darling. He'll bury you in the same cold ground he built his entire empire on. Then at least I'll know I loved a man who tried to be better," she said, her voice filled with quiet dignity. Rafe's mocking smirk slowly faded from his face. He looked back at Mateo, his eyes narrowed. "You've gone soft, Rico. Maybe—" Mateo conceded, his voice deceptively calm. "But soft doesn't necessarily mean weak." The air went still, charged with an unspoken tension that hung heavy in the fog. Then, Rafe's phone buzzed urgently. He glanced down at it, just long enough for Mateo to give the prearranged signal from deep within the swirling fog. Headlights suddenly flared, piercing through the darkness. Police sirens erupted in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. Detective Mara Cole stepped out from behind the headlights, her gun raised and pointed directly at Rafe. "Rafe Calder," she called out, her voice ringing with authority. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, kidnapping, and racketeering." Rafe's jaw dropped in disbelief. "You set me up." Mateo's tone remained calm and controlled. "No, Rafe, you set yourself up. I just opened the door for you." The takedown was swift and decisive. Rafe's men were disarmed before they even had time to react. As the cold steel handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists, Rafe glared venomously at Mateo. "You think you're clean now? You think the world actually forgives? You'll never be free, Rico. You don't get out. You just build prettier cages around yourself." When the noise finally faded and the flashing sirens disappeared into the distance, Liz turned to Mateo, her eyes filled with a mixture of relief and lingering concern. "You used the law instead of a gun." He nodded once, a subtle acknowledgement of her words. "You were right. Fear builds empires, but love builds exits." She smiled through her tears, her heart filled with a hope she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. "So what now?" He exhaled slowly, releasing years of pent-up tension. "Now we take the third door." "What's that?" "The one that exists between the life I had and the life I truly want." He reached out and gently brushed a stray raindrop from her cheek, his touch tender and filled with a depth of emotion he could barely express. "That door only opens if you walk through it with me." "I already did," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Mateo kissed her then, A slow, deliberate kiss that felt as if it were rewriting every scar on her soul. When they finally pulled apart, she said softly, "What will you tell Eva?" "That angels don't always have wings," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Sometimes they wear aprons." Back at the penthouse, Zianina stood silently by the window as Matteo and Liz arrived, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the evening light. Eva ran to greet them, her eyes shining brightly. "Daddy, did the bad men finally go away?" Matteo knelt down, hugging her tightly. "They did, Prince. We're safe now." Eva looked up at Liz, her small face filled with gratitude. "You stayed with us. Always," Liz said softly, her voice filled with unwavering promise. Na crossed herself reverently. Then maybe the angels finally did their job. Matteo looked at the two of them, his precious daughter and the extraordinary woman who had saved her. Not once, but twice. Once with unwavering courage and once with the transformative power of unconditional love. And he felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Peace. He took Liz's hand in his, holding it firmly. "You know, I used to think redemption was just a story reserved for other people. And now?" she asked softly, her eyes searching his. "Now, I think it's our story," he said, his voice filled with a newfound hope. Outside, the city pulsed with life, still vibrant, still dangerous, and ultimately indifferent. But inside, in the quiet sanctuary of the penthouse, Matteo Rico finally stopped fighting the ghosts of his past. He'd finally found the elusive third door, and this time he didn't have to walk through it alone. Morning arrived as if the entire city had collectively remembered how to breathe again. The sun leapt vibrantly off the shimmering East River and threw streaks of shimmering gold across the expansive glass of Matteo Rico's opulent penthouse. Somewhere below, a lone street violinist tuned a melancholic melody, seemingly unaware that it was about to soundtrack a promise. Inside, the quiet felt earned, not merely a temporary truce, but a genuine threshold into something new. Liz Thompson watched as the warm light slowly crawled across the polished living room floor, and a hopeful thought blossomed in her mind. Some days are simply destined for new beginnings. She was barefoot, her feet bare on the cool floor. Her hair was a soft, tousled tumble at her shoulders, clean and slightly rebellious. There was a dusting of flour scattered across the kitchen countertop from the night before, remnants of Ava's fervent request for courage cookies. And Zianina, ever the wise matriarch, had declared, "Sugar sticks better to vows than fear ever does." The oven clicked softly, still radiating a gentle warmth. The lingering aroma of cinnamon and bright orange zest filled the air like a sweet benediction. Ava twirled joyfully across the patterned rug, in a pristine white dress that she had chosen herself. A slightly crooked crown of delicate paper flowers adorned her head. "Daddy," she announced with a seriousness that belied her age, solemn as a tiny judge, "today we do practice wedding." "Zia says, practice makes forever," Eva reported, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Matteo smiled with just one half of his mouth, a subtle expression of happiness that men who have long forgotten how to smile often relearn in private. He was unshaven, his sleeves casually rolled up, the dark black of his shirt contrasting sharply with the glinting gold watch at his wrist and the intricate ink on his forearm. He looked like a man who had seen the staggering cost of love and had resolutely decided to pay it anyway, regardless of the consequences. "Practice wedding first?" He agreed, his eyes searching out Liz's as if she were the entire point of the morning. "Real wedding next." "Real?" Liz asked, her heartbeat momentarily skipping a beat. They had casually mentioned soon the night before. They had said after the dust settled, but the dust, it seemed, had not asked for permission to settle. It simply had, in its own unpredictable time. He crossed the distance between them, the sprawling cityscape climbing the windows behind him, and took her hand in his with a quiet certainty that seemed to steady the very air around them. "I made a promise in a cold warehouse once," he said quietly, his voice filled with a depth of emotion. "I've made vows with bullets and silence and fear. I will absolutely not make this one that way. I want a priest present. I want my aunt to be there. I want my daughter to scatter sugar on the cannoli and declare it holy. Daddy says, sugar is church, Eva reported, her face alight with pure delight. Liz laughed softly, but her eyes shone brightly. Church can be a kitchen, she said, her voice filled with heartfelt emotion. I think God invented aprons to stand in for armor. Na, who had been silently observing from the doorway, clicked her tongue disapprovingly. Armor is for the weak. Aprons are for the brave. She set a small velvet box carefully on the counter with a soft, ceremonial thump. He had these made years ago. He thought he would never get the chance to actually use them. He was wrong, thankfully. I told him so, of course, but the stubborn man never listens. Mateo's gaze softened with something that bordered on bashfulness. A rare and fleeting emotion he wore exactly once, in a way that made it seem all the more genuine. Right now, he said softly, his voice filled with a quiet intensity. He gently opened the velvet box. 2 rings shimmered softly against the dark velvet lining, one simple and strong, crafted with understated elegance, the other delicate and breathtaking, adorned with a line of diamonds that seemed to capture and reflect the surrounding light. Liz felt something within her chest finally open, something she had subconsciously held tightly closed for over a decade. Not because of the inherent value of the stones themselves, but because of the almost imperceptible way his hand trembled slightly as he carefully lifted the smaller ring. Like a man who knows in his very bones that he must never, ever drop what truly matters. He cleared his throat softly, attempting to regain his composure. We can wait, he said, his voice a low rumble. And it was absolutely true. Patience ran deep within his blood, flowing through his veins with the same force and discipline as violence. Both required a certain unwavering focus. We can plan this. Invite people. The very word invite sounded almost fictional, foreign on his tongue. But not today, Liz said, surprising even herself with how easily the words flowed. If Na will stand in for every single person who truly matters. If Eva will gleefully ruin her pristine white dress with scattered sugar. If Detective Mara Cole will graciously sign whatever official city documents a man like you needs to make the sensationalizing papers behave themselves for once. Na crossed herself dramatically, her eyes twinkling with amusement. Look at this extraordinary woman, she declared theatrically. A strategist and a saint, all rolled into one. Not a saint, Liz said softly, shaking her head slightly. Just a person who's finally done with waiting for her life to actually start. Mateo looked like a man who was finally being given oxygen after years of stubbornly learning to live on only half a lung. Today, he agreed, his voice filled with a newfound certainty. This afternoon, he kissed her knuckles, then her wrist, and then the incredibly sensitive inside of her wrist, where her pulse beat a frantic tattoo, telling the raw truth long before her conscious mind even remembered how. Liz closed her eyes, savoring the moment. The kiss was not some calculated performance. It was a profound vow spoken in a primal language that the skin understands first and foremost. From the hallway, the elevator chimed. Na bristled instantly. We are absolutely not expecting anyone with bad energy. And if it happens to be the bad energy itself, I will personally show it my trusty rolling pin. Save the rolling pin for later, Na, Mateo murmured, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. But his entire posture had subtly altered. His shoulders were set, his attention laser-focused. He moved silently toward the door with the undeniable force and inevitability of the shifting oceans when the moon pulls, both natural and absolute. The key card slid smoothly, the door swung. The door swung open. Mara Cole walked in. Rain plastered her leather jacket, though the sky itself remained dry. Her eyes scanned the room, taking everything in at once. The flower on the counter, the velvet box, Eva's crown. The way Mateo instinctively positioned himself between Liz and the door, the subtle tick in her cheek. Then she let out a breath, and a fleeting smile flickered across her face. Good morning to the most complicated domestic situation in New York, she announced. Did I interrupt a rehearsal? Or is this the main event? Both. Na declared. Stay. Blessing requires witnesses. Mara gave a quick, two-fingered salute, but her professional demeanor returned almost instantly. Short version, because I'm not keen on dying. Rafe's been arrested and he's extremely unhappy. She paused. The DA's case is solid. The feds want in, but... She set a manila folder on the counter, tapping it once. Guys like Rafe don't just build with muscle. They build with accountants. Mateo didn't even flinch. Say the name. Elias Bram, Mara said. Numbers guy. Clean on paper, dirty in the spaces between. He's kept Rafe solvent for years. We raided a storage unit this morning, ledgers. Burner phones. A nice little nest egg you might recognize from your missing shipment circa 2017. She glanced at Liz. I said I owed your man a life. I'm paying interest. I brought the paper trail. Arrest him. Working on it, Mateo replied. Mara countered. He's smart, slippery, the kind of rat who chews through walls and lies low. He has one thing left he cares about, Rafe's revenge. With muscle out of play, he'll reach for optics. Her gaze went back to the window, which means if you're planning on signing anything today that looks like joy, he'll try to overwrite it. Try, Mateo said. The word held a quiet menace. Try. Mara nodded. My people will be around the perimeter. Discreet, and Rico's. There's no such thing as clean anymore. But there is clear. Do what you do best. Make the lines clear. He gave a single nod. He didn't say thank you, but the room heard it anyway. Eva, who had been listening with the earnest patience of a child absorbing the mysterious conversations of adults, tugged on Mara's sleeve. Do you want a cookie? She asked. They make bravery. Mara's expression softened. I have never been offered better armor, she said, accepting a cookie as if it were a sacred offering. They got married in the late afternoon as the city held its breath. Na's garden terrace faced west. Ivy climbed the brick wall like verdant handwriting. Pots of basil and rosemary filled the air with their scent. A folding table became an altar, draped with a white linen cloth. Na had found a priest who owed her 3 favors and a ride home. He wore a stole embroidered with vines and an expression that suggested he had sanctioned worse and blessed less. Eva carefully sprinkled sugar and powdered sugar over cannoli shells. To make love stick, she recited. So it doesn't slide off in the rain. That is theology, Na said, impressed. Mara stood near the railing, speaking into her sleeve in hushed code, confirming the perimeter was secure. Dario lingered in the shadows, his natural habitat. Liz's dress was simple, cream silk that moved like liquid light when she walked. The sleeves brushed her wrists as if reluctant to leave her touch. Her hair flowed freely, adorned with small pins that sparkled like stars. She wore no veil. She wanted to see the man she was pledging herself to before, during, and after the vows. Mateo wore a black suit that didn't try to overshadow the occasion. He had shaved. The lion tattoo on his wrist peeked out from his cuff, as if approving his choice to commit to love. The priest cleared his throat, his hands gentle. We are gathered to do the thing life is for. Na interrupted, then waved for the priest to continue. He did so with the weary wisdom of a person who had learned long ago to let women lead when the situation demanded it. Do you, Mateo Rico, take? I do, Mateo said, his voice like stone warmed by the sun. He didn't look away from Liz. He couldn't look anywhere else because there was nowhere else he wanted to be. I take your hand now and every time my fear tries to open it. The priest blinked, then smiled. And do you, Liz Thompson, take? I do, Liz said, her voice clear in the gentle breeze. I take your name without losing mine. I take your daughter without pretending I am a ghost of the mother she lost. I take your life with both hands. And I won't let it turn into the thing you were before love found you. Mateo's throat worked. The city seemed to lean in closer. Rings? Na prompted, pressing the gold bands into their palms. He slid the band onto her finger slowly, carefully, reverently. I have loved with my body in 100 wrong ways, he said, neither proud nor ashamed, only honest. This is the first time I love with my life, If a bullet is a sentence, I will stand between it and you and make a new grammar. Language, Na muttered, dabbing at her eyes. Liz slid the circle of light onto his finger. I can't promise to make the world safe, she said. I can promise to make home so brave that the world becomes small. The priest lifted his hands. What God has woven and the city has dared, let no one tear asunder. He smiled, sudden and boyish. Kiss the bride, Mr. Rico. Mateo did, with the reverence of a man who understands the sacredness of altars and the hunger of a man who has been intentionally starving himself. It was not a show. It was devout. When they broke apart, the garden erupted in applause like summer rain. Cannoli, Eva declared, because joy must be consumed to truly count. They laughed, and for a moment, the terrible, beautiful machine that was New York became a village. The shot came at the edge of laughter. A small, sharp sound, the kind of crack only ears that had learned the language of violence could immediately decipher. Mara's down, split the air. Dario moved before the echo faded. Mateo reacted instantly, pivoting, angling, covering. Na grabbed Eva with a speed that suggested she had been quick her whole life, even before children taught her to be even quicker. Liz didn't freeze. She didn't scream. She stepped past fear and placed herself at Mateo's side, as if the choreography had been rehearsed. His hand found her shoulder. His weight shifted to make his body a wall. Inside, he said, his voice low and lethally calm. The second shot shattered glass. A pot of basil exploded into a cloud of green. The priest ducked behind the altar with the practiced piety of a man who had blessed soldiers going to war and knew the drill. Rooftop across, Mara snapped, already in motion. Southeast corner, HVAC bay. Bram, Mateo said, and it wasn't a question. Mara's eyes flicked to him for a split second. Yes, time seemed to slow. If you listened carefully, you could hear the city's pulse beneath the rising panic. A baseline as old as the brick itself. Eva, Liz said softly, kneeling down so she was face to face with her daughter. Want to do something only the bravest princess can do? Eva's eyes were wide. She nodded. Take Zia's hand and crawl under the big table. Count the sugar pieces. Don't stop until I say starlight. Can you? Another nod. Starlight, Eva whispered, practicing. Good girl. Go. Na hissed out a combination of prayer and strategy, shepherding the child and the priest and turning furniture into a fortress. Mateo's hand tightened on Liz's shoulder. Liz, I know, she said. Inside. But she didn't move yet. Not away from him. She pressed her palms against his chest, over his heart, over the weight he carried, and looked up at him, her eyes steady and bright. You do what you must. I will not be the reason you hesitate. Not possible, he answered, which meant, * you are why I live at all. * he brushed his lips against her forehead, quickly, like signing a document he had already memorized. Inside, she ran low and clean into the apartment's shadows. Mara and 2 uniformed officers flowed past her, a river of practiced motion. Dario took the stairwell 2 steps at a time with a suppressed fury that sounded like pounding footsteps. Mateo moved toward the terrace edge. He moved differently than the men Mara commanded. Quieter, from an older school, his movements were a geometry of angles that made him hard to see until it was too late. He counted windows, reflections, air. He listened for the slight change in breath a shooter makes before deciding to end someone else's story from afar. 3 floors across, a glint of metal, a muzzle barely visible in the shadows. Mateo deliberately stepped into the open. Rico! Mara barked from the other side. Don't! The 3rd shot rang out. Mateo was already moving. Twist, drop, roll toward the railing. Not clean. He felt the hot sting as the bullet grazed his shoulder. Heat and wetness. And the electric shock that screamed. * you are still here, but not by much. * he welcomed the pain. Pain focuses. Pain writes the sentence in the language he speaks. When the city forgets who taught it grammar, he thought. Breathed in, out. He didn't need to kill. He needed to stop it. Clear, not clean. Hands where I can see them. Mara's voice boomed from a bullhorn, now wielded by a woman who understood how to use theatricality to keep blood in veins. Sirens began to wail in the distance. The rooftop metal flashed again. The figure crouched, deciding. A second glint cut the angle from below. Dario, the shadow with a purpose. A thud. Curse. The sound of certainty leaving a man's body. Don't shoot, Mara commanded the uniformed officers, her voice sharp enough to herd lions. If he falls, he dies. We want the ledger to talk. 2 minutes later, which felt like 20, Elias Bram emerged from behind the HVAC unit. His hands were raised, shaking. His face was pale. His thin mouth was twisted with a man's conviction that numbers outrank people. A detective cuffed him. Dario relieved him of the rifle with the quiet disdain reserved for men who outsource their courage to distance. Why today? Mara asked, nudging a bullet casing toward an evidence bag with her boot. Bram gave a weak smile. Because some men think they're clever when they're merely cruel. Because joy photographs better. Because grief blurs. Because he should have had to choose between the kiss and the bullet. You don't get to write that story, Mara said. Not anymore. They frog-marched him down into a city suddenly interested in what justice might look like with a face. Across the terrace, Na's head popped up above the altar. Is it done? She demanded. Done enough, Mara answered. For today? Matteo exhaled, the tension releasing from a place he had learned to keep tightly controlled. The gray of his suit was stained with crimson. He looked at it like a man checking the time. Then he looked past it to the doorway where Liz stood, braced against the frame, her eyes wet but not with fear. She walked to him without hesitation and pressed her palm against his wound, as if in prayer. He caught her wrist gently. It's nothing. It is not nothing, she said, her voice soft with a controlled fury that was more intimate than panic. It is the last time our joy is interrupted by a man who mistakes accounting for power. That sounds like a vow, he said, his mouth fighting a smile. It is, she said. Add it to the list. He kissed her quickly, then winced as laughing moved the wrong muscle. She made a sound between tenderness and reprimand and steered him toward the kitchen island. Because sanctuaries come in marble and cinnamon too. Eva appeared, sugar dust in her hair, her face bright with the excitement of following orders under fire. Starlight? She asked. Starlight, Liz said, gathering her daughter into an embrace that tasted of salt and relief and sugar. The priest stood, dusting cannoli crumbs from his stole. In my professional opinion, he declared, your marriage is valid under God, the city, and what we call in canon law whenever New York tries to interfere. Na dabbed at her eyes and then flicked her wrist as if shooing away flies. We finished the cannoli, she ordered. Bravery requires sugar. They did. You cannot pause forever when the world tries to turn you into a statue. You must eat and bleed and kiss and sign and laugh. The wound was cleaned. The suit jacket was discarded. Gauze appeared, courtesy of Nina. Mara took statements in the shorthand of a woman who keeps her reports human. Dario poured espresso with the resignation of a man who has never won an argument with Nina and never will. When the adrenaline subsided, quiet returned, this time with chairs. They sat. The city resumed its song at a lower volume. Mara zipped her notebook closed. Bram will talk, she said. Men like him fear prison more than bullets. Rafe's web will unravel. She looked at Matteo, then at Liz. I can't promise a clean end, but I can see a clear one from here. Thank you, Liz said. Mara shook her head. Don't thank me. Keep doing this. She gestured a wide arc that included sugar rings, a bandage, a child, a priest, a lion peeking out from under a cuff. It reminds my side what we're trying to protect when we play at being heroes. After she left, evening began to color the windows. Na lit candles not because they were needed, but because light should be chosen, not begged for. She pulled out a small radio, older than Eva, and tuned it until a slow Italian waltz filled the room. Dance, she commanded, like a queen ordering crops to grow. Matteo stood carefully. Liz stood with him, You'll stain your bandage, she murmured. I'll ruin my reputation, he countered. Too late, she said. I already did. They moved. Not showy, not practiced. The kind of dance where you count heartbeats, not steps. The room blurred at the edges the way rooms do when a life stands up inside them and looks around, surprised to find itself invited. You scared me, she whispered, her cheek against his shoulder. Today? He asked. Always, she said. And when he stiffened, she smiled against him so he could feel it. You scare me with how much I want the ordinary with you. Grocery lists, lost socks, a calendar with hand-drawn hearts on it. I have never owned socks long enough to lose them, he confessed. You're about to, she said. He tightened his arm around her, the slightest fraction, the way men do when they realize they can hold the world without crushing it. Tell me a future, he asked. She paused, considering. A front room with too many books, a bell over the door, a child laughing in both English and Italian, a coffee machine that wheezes like an old man, a sign that says, Rico and Company, grief is a language. We translate. His silence was full of astonishment that a dream could accept him without translation. You still want the counseling studio? He said. Yes. And you still want something that doesn't require you to carry a gun to feel like a man? He didn't deny it. I want to look at my daughter and tell her that the family name means protection that doesn't require fear. You already started, Liz said. Today was the first piece after the last storm. It won't be the last storm, he said. I know, she said. That's why we stacked sugar. He laughed, then winced, then laughed at wincing, and she kissed the corner of his mouth in apology and affection. Eva watched with the innocent joy of a child who believes that when adults hold hands, the weather changes. Again, she begged when the song ended. Again, again, again. They obliged, because a child's again is a commandment. The epilogue of the day didn't announce itself. It unfolded slowly through the weeks that followed. A quiet architecture. The headlines shifted. Rafe Calder's face became a stock photo for men who thought other people were pawns and learned juries dislike chess. Elias Bram testified with the clipped horror of a man who had worshipped numbers and been betrayed by math. Na tooted at the television and turned the volume down when the anchors used the word monster, because she didn't like lazy language. Mateo sold the last of the questionable properties with the ruthless precision of a surgeon cutting off gangrenous tissue to save a limb he wanted to use to hold his family. He closed 2 clubs quietly. He opened a logistics firm loudly. He established a foundation in Isabella's name with an endowment that made accountants feel holy. Counseling for grieving children, scholarships for kids who spoke in pictures before they remembered how to speak with sound. He asked Liz to design the intake room. She painted one wall the exact color of Eva's paper crown. The sign Liz had dreamed of, a small brass plaque, hung near the door. Rico House, Starlight Room. Because that is the word. Eva explained to a reporter who cried on local television and then bought a stack of cannoli from Nina. Detective Mara stopped by the ribbon cutting and refused a photo but accepted a cookie. I arrest bad guys, she told Eva, who nodded solemnly. And I eat sugar when the world behaves. Good, Eva said. Sugar is armor. Dario brought flowers he pretended were for Nina, but placed near the plaque like a soldier laying something at a monument. At night, when the city sang its loud lullaby, Mateo sometimes woke with the old panic, the one that counted exits and windows and potential loss. He would reach into the dark and find Liz's hand, and the counting would stop. Other nights, he would pad to Eva's doorway and stand like a guard at a bridge that no longer charged a toll. He would listen to her breathe. He would go back to bed. A man learning that sleep is not surrender. It is trust. They married again. Later, bigger church, flowers, a proper procession, and Na wore a hat that could shade a small village. But they kept the first day as the real one. They kept the flower and the blood and the basil in a jar labeled holy. There were fights. There are always fights when 2 wild animals choose to live in a house. He was too protective. She was too brave. He said no to a television interview. She said yes to a panel about grief. He paced the lobby of the counseling studio like it was a tarmac, and her plane was overdue. Even when she was upstairs, they learned that love is not a performance or a pity or a rewrite of what died. It is a room with windows you open on purpose. On a winter afternoon, snow drifted through the city, hushing the sounds. Liz found him in the kitchen making coffee badly and trying to pass it off as drinkable. "You know there's a machine at the studio that could sue this for slander," she teased, sliding in behind him, pressing a kiss under his ear. "I am practicing humility," he said, his tone dignified, but lying. He turned and trapped her against the counter, not pushing too hard, the gentle force not needing to prove a point. "Or maybe I am hoping you will save me again." "Always," she said. It had become their shortest prayer. He brushed a thumb across her cheek. "You saved me before I knew I was drowning." "You were teaching yourself to breathe air and water," she replied. "I just offered a hand." "Marry me," he said, out of habit and pure joy. "We did," she laughed. "Then marry me again," he said, because some men learn that repetition is its own devotion. She kissed him like an answer that never changes. From the doorway, Ava rolled her eyes with the dramatic flair of a child of two people who kiss too much. "Gross," she declared, then beamed. Because children learn safety by watching what their parents are not afraid of. "Go get your coat," Mateo told her. "We're late." "For what?" Liz asked. "Ribbon cutting at the second Starlight Room," he said. "South Bronx. The waiting list is longer than Na's patience." Na, appearing as if summoned by the sound of her name and the promise of a fight, brandished a clipboard. "We help all who come," she announced. "And we do not sign autographs unless they ask for my biscotti recipe." "Which you will not give," Dario said, passing through with a carton of donated toys and the weary look of a man who had found a second job guarding joy. "I will die with my secrets," Na vowed. "Not before 100 birthdays," Liz said, kissing her cheek. They bundled into the corridor, into the elevator, and into the afternoon, where sirens still wailed and headlines still blared and people still forgot how to say please. But when the doors opened onto the street, someone recognized Mateo and didn't flinch. They said, "Thank you." He looked like a man who had not expected that word and had no pockets ready for it. Liz squeezed his hand. He learned where to keep gratitude. In the mouth. Say it back. "Thank you," he told the woman, meaning it. At the new center, a little boy with a coat too big for him and a drawing of an angel that looked like a waitress handed Eva a paper crown. "For courage," he said. She crowned him instead. "For kings who share," she replied, and the boy stood taller by half an inch that you could measure with a ruler or your heart. Mara showed up late, her hair slightly frizzed from the snow, paperwork in her bag, a grin threatening to betray her usual composure. "Bram took a deal," she told Mateo softly. "He'll rot in a cell that becomes his legacy. Rafe will be a lesson in case law." "You," she gestured. "You'll do this." "This?" Mateo echoed, looking at Liz, at Eva, at Na, arguing with a contractor about the shame of beige paint. "Yes, this." When the ribbon fell and the flashbulbs tried to steal the light and failed, he bent to Liz's ear. "Tell me another future," he requested. She considered. "A night with no sirens. A morning where you burn the coffee and we don't care. A summer where Eva's hair smells like pool and sun and sugar. A long table, too many chairs, and every seat filled." He closed his eyes, opened them, and let the vision write itself on the back of his eyelids. "I can build that," he said, "without hurting anything I love." "You already started," she answered. They walked home by a route that used to require counter-surveillance and now required only a scarf. The city did its city thing. Men selling chestnuts. A woman humming into her scarf. A boy parkouring off a bench and apologizing when he nearly collided with a stroller. Life making noise. Life refusing to stand still long enough to be scared. On their block, a florist had arranged a window display in white and green and gold. Liz stopped. "Wedding colors?" she murmured. "Again?" he asked, the smile in his voice making the question not a joke. Again, she said. As often as possible. Takes a lot to remind the world of the choice we made. He intertwined their fingers, making no attempt to conceal the ring or the scar that adorned his hand. He'd come to understand that they both belonged to the same language, that they were both testaments to what you promise and what you overcome. Up above, the apartment lights cast a welcoming glow. Inside, the kitchen would likely still carry a subtle hint of cinnamon if you paid close attention. There was a jar on the counter, labeled Holy, holding a small amount of sugar, waiting for no particular reason and every reason. You never knew when you might need to piece together a fragmented day. Eva darted ahead of them. "Starlight," she exclaimed, simply for the joy of hearing the word resonate up the stairwell. "Starlight," Liz echoed softly. "Starlight," Mateo repeated, savoring the word like a man relishing a hard-won victory. He unlocked the door, ushering them in before him. Then he followed. Some nights conclude with the lingering scent of smoke. Others end with the sweetness of sugar. This one culminated with both, and a kiss that served as a reminder to a man who had once knelt before the wrong idol. That love wasn't a riddle to be solved, but a story you continually wrote together. If you're drawn to narratives like this one, please consider subscribing to the channel. That's how I'll know you've truly enjoyed it. Even if you're watching on your TV, please take a moment to become part of this community of fans who cherish emotional and heartfelt stories. Your support is invaluable, and it allows us to share even more stories just like this one.